What the hell am I even supposed to do here? Oh my god, I'm a genius. Come on. Oh, thank god it works. Am I missing something? Please. Please work. Oh, no, it's not going to. On March 6th, 2026, the 8th annual Opus Magnum Tournament began. And this would prove to be the craziest and most intense competition I've ever participated in. If you don't know what Opus Magnum is, I recently made a video about it. Maybe you've already seen it? Anyway, in brief, Opus Magnum is a thinky, puzzly engineering type of game where you use grabby arms and simple instructions to turn balls and shapes into different balls and different shapes. Turn this into this by way of this. It's very satisfying. And the game has a dedicated community of mega fans, eager to optimize every puzzle to the fullest extent, and so in 2019, the first Opus Magnum tournament was held, and a new tournament has taken place every year since. These tournaments are so fun. I'm not exaggerating when I say some of the highest highs in my video gaming lifetime were spent scrutinizing a clockwork beast of my own making, trying to squeeze out one last optimization before the deadline. This year's tournament was to be hosted by the user Kazian, aka Still Not a Brick. Kazian is without a doubt a top tier player, strong in pretty much every metric. He came in 5th in 2024, 2nd in 2025, and he would have certainly been a contender to win this year if he wasn't hosting. The format is pretty straightforward. Each week a new puzzle is released, and it usually has 2 metrics assigned to it. Competitors then have about 9 days to come up with the best solutions they can for those specific metrics. Now, I have competed in every tournament since 2021, with the exception of 2025, because my second kid was born, and I didn't have any neurons to spare. But I was eager to get back into it in 2026. But this tournament would prove to be unlike any that had come before. This is because, well, new players are cracked. The first puzzle of the tournament was called Snowflake Amputation, and it was kind of an interesting opener. Typically puzzles give you small inputs and task you with creating a larger output, but here we're going from big input to small outputs, a refreshing way to shake things up. As I mentioned, each puzzle in the tournament is assigned 2 specific metrics that competitors must optimize for. In this puzzle, those metrics were area and trackless instructions. Area is what you might call a vanilla metric. It's all about making your machine as small as possible. Simple enough. Trackless instructions, or TI, is another story altogether. It measures the amount of instruction symbols in your tape loop, so grab, turn, drop, return would add 4 to your total, and remember that we're always trying to minimize numbers. This metric also strictly disallows the use of track, and I'll give you a minute to ponder why that might be. Like some, this is a metric entirely invented by the community. We're actually going to see a lot of non-standard metrics in this tournament. But TI is certainly among the most mainstream of the bunch, and looking at TI solves, it's easy to see why. These solves are hypnotic, often seeming to assemble products as if by magic. I mean, just look at this guy. This might be my favorite non-sum solution anyone's ever made. So, why is track forbidden in this metric? Well, when you allow track, the instruction metric kind of breaks in free space. In fact, it has been proven that every puzzle is beatable with either 3 or 4 instructions, and they all look something like this. Abominations all. And definitely not suitable for a tournament. Foreshadowing. So, week 1, area and trackless instructions. I like both of these metrics, but I'm not particularly skilled at either of them. This time around, I started trying out different 26 area layouts, and I got a few working. Then I realized in one of the layouts that I could delete one of the arms and still solve the puzzle, bringing it down to 25. I couldn't see any way that 24 area was possible, but I'd been in this boat before, so we'd have to wait and see. TI didn't go as well. I kind of locked myself into this mechanism here, since it's a repeating action that can deconstruct the entire input. I found a 15 instruction layout fairly easily, which I optimized to 14 and then 13 instructions, but after that I hit a brick wall, and I couldn't find any improvements. So I submitted both of my solutions and waited for the deadline. Now, let's talk about participation. The previous record for most participants was Week 1 of Zorflax's 2024 tournament, Blue Vitriol, capping out at 67 participants. Week 1 of this tournament received 154 submissions. What was the cause of this huge spike in players? Yeah, it was me. My video on Opus Magnum Sum records took off and caused a flood of new players, many of whom decided to participate in the tournament, which was just around the corner. I was delighted to see new name after new name high up in the rankings, puzzle after puzzle. But let's see how I did. For area, it turned out 25 was indeed minimum, thank God. I tied 13th place with the user John. In fact, we had identical solutions. And for a 396 cycle area solution, that is incredible. But this wouldn't be the only tertiary tie in this metric. In fact, the user Albatross predicted someone else would arrive at his exact solution, and he even went as far as to submit under the name a tertiary tie, and I'll be damned if he wasn't dead on the money. He tied for 3rd place with Vermilion Dragon, a new player, nice. The rest of the podium was Rebix in 2nd, dodging the tertiary tie by somehow saving 10G. And then in 1st, Zorflax smoked everyone with 25 area and 275 cycles. In other years, I wouldn't really consider 13th to be a great placement, but I'm going to have to get used to it because rankings are going to be much lower than I'm accustomed to this year. I mean, look at my TI results. 39th place. Ugh. That is by far the lowest rank I've ever received in any of the tournaments I've participated in. And this is just week 1. First place was, believe it or not, another tie, with Fuyu and Brother Mojo finding the same 9 instruction solution. I mean, it just looks so effortless. Love it. And so let's see what the overall rankings are for the first week. Oh man, 23rd place? That's rough. Week 2 was called Quiet Hours, and geez, this was a weird one. You're given 1 salt input and have to make 13 individual vitae outputs, times 6, for 78 total products. And if the puzzle itself wasn't weird enough, the metrics were even weirder. The first metric was cycles times arms, colloquially known as CARMS. This is actually a pretty fun one. If you recall, cycles measures how fast your machine completes the puzzle. So with this metric, if your cycle count is 100 and you use 4 arms, that would be a CARMS score of 400. But this would be beaten by a cycle count of 199 using only 2 arms, a CARMS score of 398. So it's essentially about finding a sweet spot between speed and arm count. What I love about this metric is exploring the possible layouts and figuring out what the best number of arms could be. I started with a 5-arm solution, then 4 arms, then 2, then back to 4, back to 2, before an epiphany made me realize the correct number. 1. You see, a hex arm counts as 1 arm, but it can grab and hold up to 6 atoms at a time, and I realized I could load 2 animismus glyphs simultaneously instead of just 1. Except, why just 2? Why not 5? Yes, it turns out the question this puzzle was really asking wasn't how many arms are optimal, but how many glyphs are optimal. I think I nailed it with 5, and I managed to nab 3rd place with this design. Notice how I can grab more salt while disposing the unneeded atoms at the same time. That's the sauce right there.
These last 2 VJ are just for show.
It doesn't have to load them, does it though? I
It might
wouldn't
not.
save cycles if it doesn't load.
Oh, that's true. I do overproduce on the last batch. Huh. and the second place solution only beat me by 8 cycles. Let's see. God damn it. Anyway, first place went to Rebix with another 5 Animismus variant. I'm glad I was on the correct wavelength this time, because I certainly wasn't for the second metric, which was probably the strangest metric ever to be featured in a tournament. The primary was latency, which is not unusual in and of itself. On a normal puzzle, this would be measuring how fast it takes you to get to one of 6 products complete, ignoring the other 5. But here, since there's 13 outputs, it's how fast can you get to 13 out of 78. Usually this metric is used with very complicated products, but here it's trivial. With only the one salt input, you just make Vitae at max input speed, and you should drop the last one on cycle 56, easy peasy. There's no tricks you can use to get this number any lower. But what made this metric insane for this puzzle was the secondary tiebreaker, which was maximum distance between outputs. What? I had to reread this a half dozen times before it started to make sense. So you want 2 outputs as far away on the board as possible, while still hitting that minimum latency of 56 cycles. This is one of the only times in this game where you're trying to maximize a number instead of minimize it. Just weird. And I have to admit, my brain was not really working with this one. All I could think to do was have these 2 glyphs as far away as possible, while still being able to trigger them at min latency. Then I took the first 2 Vitae and swung them in a relay race of arms as far as I could with the remaining time. I found a few small tricks to push this distance a little bit further, but other than that, I just couldn't think of anything better to do. I even messaged one of the commentators and questioned whether the puzzle had been properly play-tested, which is embarrassing, because I placed 58th. Maybe you've already figured out what I missed. I was correct in that there's not a lot of ways to further the distance while moving a single atom, but moving sticks of bonded atoms can cover way more ground. And so, all the actually good solutions create large rods to be swept away at lightning speeds before they are debonded and dropped right on time. First place went to Love Math Boy, who wrote in the note that he only downloaded the game 3 weeks ago. Absolutely wild to go from never having played to coming in first in a tournament metric in less than a month. Huge congratulations. So for me, that's 3rd and 58th. What a spread. Luckily, high ranks are better for your score than low ranks are bad, if you follow me. So I did go up in the overall rankings to 11th place. Alright, not bad. But wait, I forgot to mention, there was a little note on the puzzles event page. Why are the metrics kinda stupid this week? Okay, this should be good. Because there's a DLC dropping on March 17th and many new players will be busy blah 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 blah. Oh yeah, that's right. DLC. You heard that correctly. This niche puzzle game, which I love so much, got DLC 9 years after its release. De Re Metallica. That's the worst name I ever heard. Of the metallic matter. Okay then. Anyway, it started as a fan-made mod, which caught the eye of none other than Zachtronic himself, who worked with the original mod creators, including storied villain Mr. Puzzle, and the whole thing was given polish, new assets, new mechanics, new puzzles, new music, new story, and ascension into full-fledged DLC. You love to see it. And that means we would now get to play with never-before-seen glyphs and mechanisms. Ooh, goody. This would be my worst week. The title of this puzzle was Clusterf Gold? Clusterf Gold. My apologies to De Re Metallica. This is the worst name I've ever heard. This would be the first and only cabinet puzzle of the tournament. Cabinet puzzles take place in these beautiful but restrictive workspaces. So here we have these 2 hexagonal zones, which are connected by this conduit here. And this puzzle had a further restriction where the input and output couldn't be in the same chamber. The first metric was cost, with a tiebreaker of instructions. So you want to make your solve as cheap as possible, then use as few instructions as you can doing it. I quickly whipped up this solution, which cost 90G. The new DLC Glyph of Rejection extracts quicksilver out of metal, but the leftover atom is not needed for the product, so it has to be chucked in disposal, which thankfully costs 0G. However, because the disposal glyph is so large, you need a length 2 arm to reach it, and a length 2 arm necessitates 10G worth of track to access everything else. If only I could reach the disposal with a small arm, I could save that 10G. But then a cold, creeping realization dawned on me. I didn't need disposal at all. I needed to waste juggle. This is what that looks like. 80G, baby. But not only did I have to juggle all those waste atoms, remember the secondary tiebreaker was instructions, so I had to do so conditionally. That's why here at the beginning of the solve you see this arm grabbing nothing and making strange moves that don't do anything. The instruction tape has to work for each level of waste, which gets bigger and bigger as I create more outputs. Not gonna lie, this was a slog to design and program, but it was very satisfying to get it working in the end. I was shocked that this only got 15th place. It's not a terrible rank, but damn, the players are really good this year. A whopping 31 people found 80G solutions. I thought only like 12 people would. First place went to John with an 80G solution that only produced half the product each run through the instruction tape, which means not only is it conditionally handling waste atoms, but it's conditionally constructing the output as well. Nicely done. The second metric this week was rate, also known as throughput. Rate measures the average amount of time it takes to create one product or product set. And if you're a math nerd, I'll add the stipulation that this is measured at infinity. So if you finish a product every 6 cycles, your rate is 6. Easy enough. I always describe it as cycles, but you don't care about cycles. In free space, rate solves usually require you to pull inputs as fast as possible, but in cabinets you often don't have the space to process them this quickly. You need 6 atoms to make the final product, 2 earth and 4 quicksilver. The input has 1 earth and 1 gold, so you need 2 inputs to get the 2 earth, and then using the new DLC glyph you can get all the quicksilver you need from 1 or both of the remaining gold atoms. Because you're required to put the input and output in separate chambers, all the material to make the output has to travel through this single atom-sized conduit, and the fastest you can funnel atoms through is 1 every 3 cycles. Okay, so if it's 6 atoms total, and they each need to go through a conduit, that would mean my rate would be 18. Simple enough. So I got to tinkering, and I have to say, I cooked. Look at this. This is a work of art. With only 3 atoms on the input side and 2 on the output side, this is a lean machine. I was so confident in this solve that I gave it the title Perfection. Certainly this would be a podium finish, maybe even first place. 61st? What? Oh no. How embarrassing. Hubris is always punished in this game, and I was feeling the wrath of the alchemy gods. I unfortunately had made an untrue assumption, never considering the fact that yes, it does take 18 cycles for 6 atoms to go through a conduit, but you don't need to send 6 atoms. I made the critical error of putting the glyph of rejection in the input chamber instead of the output chamber. This allows you to send only 3 atoms through, which would give you a min rate of 9. Many were able to find a rate of 10, but only 3 were able to find a 9 rate solution. The winning solve was made by Rebix, again. He has established a pretty solid first place score overall. As for me, that's 2 terrible weeks in a row, and I'm languishing in 17th place. But a new rule was introduced this year, where each player's 2 lowest scoring weeks would be dropped. The idea was that it would allow players to sit out a week if they had other obligations or were feeling burnt out. But for me it now meant that I had a chance to erase these 2 mediocre performances from my final record. All I had to do was lock in. And we're off to a good start already, because this was a sum week. Finally. This puzzle was called Rochambeau, but instead of rock, paper, scissors, we have earth, vitae, and iron, and they are in the most annoying orientation. This product is the same shape as week 1's input, but instead of disassembling the snowflake, we are undisassembling it. Before we get to the sum metric, let's cover the other one, which was bounding hexagon, aka bestagon. This is, I believe, the newest metric to be tracked on the Opus Magnum leaderboards, and a lot of people don't really like it. It's an area-conscious metric that measures the smallest regular hexagon that your solution can fit inside. So this would be a bounding hexagon of 2, this is 3, and here's 4. It's pretty easy to see that 3 is impossible for this puzzle, as you can't fit both the input and output inside such a small space, but 4 is definitely doable. That means it all comes down to the tiebreaker, which is cycles, so whoever can go the fastest in this enclosed space will win. I don't have much else to say about this metric. I will say that I used to dislike bestagon from a purely conceptual standpoint, but now that I've actually played it, I like it even less. I got 13th place with this bad boy, and the winning solve was by Rebix. Geez, save some wins for the rest of us, will ya? But as I already mentioned, the other metric this week was sum. If you didn't watch my first video on Opus Magnum, sum is a metric that adds cycles plus cost plus area, and it often results in very elegant solutions. Sum is also my strongest metric, and since that video blew up, it meant that eyes were on me to perform, or at least it felt that way. My first iteration was this, which I sculpted down to this. This is just over 400 sum, and despite looking like a clean and natural assembly method, I wasn't happy with the numbers. I figured that a good sum score would be in the 350 range, maybe even lower. But what method would I use? You see, this was a bonding-debonding puzzle, by which I mean you're just chopping up 4 inputs and gluing them back together. No glyphs are needed besides bonders and debonders. This is not the type of sum puzzle at which I typically excel. 2024's tournament had a similar bonding-debonding sum puzzle called Touchstone, and I only managed 10th place at that time. I'm usually more comfortable with very complicated puzzles that require lots of different glyphs and mechanics, and this didn't even use any of the new DLC glyphs, which I was hoping to sink my teeth into. Ah well. In the end, the best strategy I could find was, to be honest, much uglier than my initial attempts. I felt like this was doing nothing special, just finding bonds and debonds that are convenient, so I wasn't super happy with it. I was able to pare it down to 314, which was much better than my initial ballpark of 350, but by this point I was certain that sub 300 was possible. But look at that, it was good enough for 3rd. I'll take it. Rebix, of course, took 2nd with 304, and the first place solve did in fact manage to break the 300 barrier. This beautiful solution by Mr. Puzzle. Week 5 featured a cheeky puzzle called Tax Fraud. The 2 metrics for this week were rate instructions and period area. Let's take a look at rate first. So rate instructions, or RI, is the kind of metric I would describe as not appropriate for a tournament. It often requires tech that some might describe as cursed. I decided that I wasn't even going to attempt any cursed instructions tech. Instead, I would just try to have an efficient rate solve using as many hex arms as possible, since they don't have to be reset, which saves instructions. I ended up with this, which I thought was okay, but because 5 inputs have to be pulled, I ended up with a period of 10. That's the length of the tape loop, more on that later, which meant that a lot of the instructions had to be duplicated. I tried making this wild contraption, which would have worked on a period of 4, but abandoned it as the instruction count ballooned past my earlier design before I could even finish it. To my surprise, many people settled on a period of 10, and it was good enough for 3rd place even. Not mine though, that got 15th, which is quickly becoming my kind of default rank. This time I lucked out, as my solution had 61 instructions, which put me ahead of a huge pileup of 6 solves with 63 instructions each. Wild. So third place was period 10, basically just a better version of my solve. But I told you this metric could be cursed. And in second place we have Rebix with this monstrosity. So this enormous track is entirely for initialization. Remember that rate isn't calculated until your machine hits a steady state, so you're free at the beginning to noodle around to your heart's content. This hex arm is using only 4 instructions, but it's moving around the entire solve, putting atoms into place to be used as wands, which in the interest of brevity I won't explain today. Honestly, exactly what's going on here is a bit above my pay grade. But this isn't even first place. The top spot went to Biggie. Let's see how cursed this one gets. Oh, it looks perfectly normal. 5 period is weird, but, I couldn't tell you how this works or why it's so instruction efficient, but hey, looks great. Let's move on to the second metric this week, period. We saw period 10, period 4, and even period 5 in rate, but how low can it go? Well, period 4 is kind of the natural starting point. An instruction length of 4 lets you grab, move, drop, and return, which means at period 4 you can pretty much do everything in this game. But what about period 3? Can you do one better? Now you have to cut one action from your instruction loop. So maybe you do grab, move, drop, and then cut the return. That's okay, hex arms don't need to return and they work fine. But the problem comes if you try to hand an atom from one arm to another. With these 3 instructions, the grab always comes right after the drop in the loop. So when the second arm tries to move away, you get a double grab, which causes the machine to crash. So period 3 is essentially all about finding creative ways to move atoms around the board. The method I came up with was to have this main tri-arm be the holder, and every other arm be let's call them decorators. The main holder arm grabs the input as a core, and then the other decorator arms can add atoms to that core, and with the right timing, their release instruction will line up with the holder arm's move instruction, and we end up with an assembly method that turns 2 inputs into 1 output. But if you recall, this creates 2 extra atoms of quicksilver, so I had to come up with this funky system of arms and track to pull the waste away. The tiebreaker was area, so this track is just long enough for the machine to create all the needed products before crashing. As I iterated, I was able to optimize this track down to a straight line, and let me say, getting the timing on this was tricky. I also managed to cram 4 quicksilver attaching atoms into 1 track loop. All in all, I was feeling pretty good about this one. Let's see how I did. 35th? Oh man, this is happening way too often. What did I miss this time? So there's a wasteless way to assemble the product, and it seems like it's easier to wrangle than my method too. So I was working harder for a worse result. Dang. Well, as a consolation prize, my method was much faster than the others. In fact, I had the fastest solution at period 3. It's got to be worth something, right? The answer is no, it's worth nothing. Okay, we're on the downslope now. And geez, I need to pick up the pace or else this video is going to be 2 hours long. Luckily, this next puzzle was a cycles puzzle, so going fast is the name of the game. It was called Amelia's Catalyst, and it's a bit of a doozy. We've had a few rate puzzles this tournament, but now we finally have a true cycles test. Cycles is way harder than rate, and it's probably the metric I am least confident in, at least as far as quote-unquote mainstream metrics are concerned. As Kazian put it himself, the puzzle is essentially taking this input and turning it inside out. We have a silver atom surrounded by all 4 elements: fire, air, water, earth. We need to squish those elements into 1 quintessence atom. Meanwhile, we need to take the center silver and reject 4 quicksilver out of it. Then we bond everything together and we're done. This means that the central silver atom needs 8 actions performed. Debond, 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 reject, 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 reject. That's a lot. My first attempt was a 26 cycle beast, but I wasn't happy with it, so I started again from scratch and managed to hit 25 cycles. And then, after a lot of fiddling, I found a 24 cycle solution. I was pretty happy with this, but I could tell that someone could go one cycle faster, as I had to waste one cycle re-grabbing the central silver. I also noticed that after grabbing all 6 inputs needed to beat the puzzle, you could grab a sneaky 7th to get some early quicksilver, theoretically lowering the cycle count even further. I made a rough modification with this idea in mind, but just look at the path the quicksilver would have to travel through. There's too much shit in the way. There's no way anyone could pull that off. Except, of course, Rebix did. In fact, he pulled a 7th and 8th input, giving him the only 22 cycle solution submitted. A first place primary improvement in cycles is a rarity in tournaments, especially one with such a high participation as this, so huge congratulations to Rebix. Meanwhile, my 24 cycle solve was good enough for 14th place, my usual zone. But I haven't mentioned the second metric, and it is, in my opinion, the dumbest metric tracked on the leaderboards. Width. You see, when you have a community of people playing a game for almost a decade and they run out of ways to optimize puzzles, they may invent ridiculous things like width. So now we're measuring the number of hexes wide your solution is. There's also height, which is a related metric, but height is fine. I like height. Why do I like height but not width? Well, on the game's hexagonal grid, you can slide things left and right nicely, but up and down is jagged and jittery. Width solutions don't look good. They're not really interesting in my opinion. I just don't see the point of playing the game this way. So, I think it was a mistake to add width to the leaderboard. I think it was a mistake to include it in the tournament, and I especially think it was a mistake to have the tiebreaker be cost, because getting to minimum width is easy with this puzzle. The input is 2 hexes wide, but it's impossible to slide off without using an extra half hex, so mid-width is 2.5. So we move on to the tiebreaker of cost. Well, with a bit of tinkering, it's fairly easy to find a layout of 160G, and indeed that's as cheap as you can do it at 2.5 width. So now we're at min primary and min secondary, so we move on to tertiary, which is cycles. That means the whole puzzle comes down to who can code this 160G layout the most efficiently. And it's super annoying because we have more mandatory waste in this puzzle. And while there is a free disposal glyph available to get rid of it, that glyph is 3 hexes wide, and so would blow your primary. I predicted that all the top solves would use my exact layout, and I was right. They're literally all identical. But my coding was good, and it earned me 4th place. First place was Calioresis with, the same layout, but somehow 40 cycles faster. Where those cycles are saved, I couldn't tell you, but that's okay, width sucks. But this was a good week for me, and check it out, I'm back in the top 10. Now I just need to hang on. And it shouldn't be too hard to do that, because this week was another sum puzzle. Well, sum 4 actually. I didn't really dive into sum 4 in my last video, but it's the standard cycles plus cost plus area, but it also adds instruction count to the total. For most puzzles this doesn't make a significant difference, and indeed a lot of sum 4 records are also sum records, or just slightly modified sum records. The puzzle this week was called Immortal Filament, and it was a polymer puzzle, meaning instead of 6 individual outputs you have to create one long continuous chain of a repeating pattern. In the center you have this string of iron atoms and then alternating Vitae and Morse atoms on the top and bottom. It is this alternating pattern that makes this an interesting puzzle, and figuring out a way to do it without a huge amount of instructions could be the winning strategy. But I have to admit, this puzzle kinda stumped me. Let's rewind to week 4's sum puzzle. There, my first design had a sum of 455, and my final submission came in at 314. So from my first design I was able to optimize it by 141 sum. But with this puzzle, my very first solution had a sum 4 of 532, and after a whole week of work on it, I was only able to get it down to 510, a decrease of only 22. That is the smallest margin of improvement I've ever had in any tournament or weekly sum puzzle. And here's the really tragic thing. As the results stream was going on, we got to this solve by Gigi Gall, at 42nd place. It's kind of zany. Look at these two big hex arms on this wonky track loop. And while the other commentators were laughing at this implausible contraption, keen-eyed Kazian drew our attention to something more interesting.
I love this, but also
Also, can we take a look at Arm 2 handling both the waste chain and the loading of division?
Oh, this Arm 2 is incredible.
Look at that. It loads the gold and gets rid of the salt waste with just one hex arm on track. My solution used two arms on track to do the same thing. This beautiful little hex arm was the breakthrough I couldn't find. While the stream was running, I booted the game, made some modifications, and calculated the new score. 488. A decrease of 22. That's literally as big a jump as from my first to my final solve. But the deadline had already passed and I missed it. Tragedy. Well, my 510 was only good enough for 9th place. Kind of a failure as far as I'm concerned. If I had found the 488, it would have made 3rd place. Beating Mr. Puzzle. Oh, I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. But it still wouldn't have been good enough to beat Calioresis, who took 2nd place with a piston. This is actually insane. Some solves do not use pistons. They cost twice as much as a regular arm and are pretty much never worth it. Across the entire leaderboard, there is only one sum record that uses a piston, and believe me, it drives me crazy. But here it really pulls its weight, grabbing both Vitae and Moors, and pushing the polymer forward. But this is only 2nd place. Now lay your eyes on this marvelous contraption by Shino. 455 sum. That is a huge drop over 2nd place. This is the kind of solve that my brain would never in a million years dream up. Very nice work. Okay, but we still have one more metric to cover this week, and it's another weird one. Parts. So everything you can pick up and move around is a part, including arms, glyphs, and even the inputs and output glyph. An interesting kind of cost-adjacent metric. We've never seen it before in a tournament, so it was anyone's ballgame. There were essentially two ways to get to min parts. The first was to use all 3 inputs and one stationary piston. This method creates salt waste, as there is nothing to do with the salt from the gold input. The second way is to nix the Vitae and Moors atoms and instead use the aforementioned salt to create them in the animismus glyph. Unfortunately, a stationary piston cannot access a full animismus glyph, so it would have to be on track. So that's -2 inputs, +1 glyph, and +1 track. I guess if there was a trick to this puzzle, it was figuring out that you can use 2 pistons instead of 1 piston on track, making this method the clear winner. Annoyingly, there is no avoiding waste, as now you have too much gold instead of salt. That makes this the 3rd puzzle to require waste handling, 4th if you include my suboptimal tax fraud method. Kazian, why do you love waste so much? Don't answer that. Anyway, I toyed with a few different layouts, but the first one I put together ended up being the best I could find. This earned me a 6th place. Pretty happy with that. But it's kind of hilarious/annoying that I did better in parts than in sum 4. First place in parts was Shino again, making this week the first with a double winner, and it wasn't Rebix either. This would actually end up being Rebix's worst week of the tournament, coming in 13th for sum and 8th for parts. That would be a very good week for a lot of the rest of us. But congrats to Shino for the double win. And while they're not strictly speaking a new player, this is their first tournament performance. And this windfall has just launched them up to 4th place, wow. A good week for me as well, climbing further to 7th place, just behind, some guy. Orange Vitriol was the name of Week 8's puzzle, and it's the 3rd Vitriol puzzle made by the community. The first 2, Green Vitriol and Blue Vitriol, were made by Zorflax, the former as a weekly puzzle and the latter during his 2024 tournament. Each Vitriol puzzle features 2 similar but slightly different molecules as outputs. The 2 metrics were cycles and track plus arms times cycles, otherwise known as tarkles. Tarkles is basically the same thing as carms from week 2, but track is heavily penalized, meaning you can't do the single arm voodoo we saw back then. I had a lot of fun with Tarkles, starting off with 4 arms, then settling on 3. This guy got me 11th place. And Rebix took first. Beautiful. Cycles was also interesting. This is the first puzzle to allow use of the new proliferation glyph. This glyph turns Quicksilver into any metal you have access to. In other words, we can turn Quicksilver into an extra silver input, which is useful because we have 2 fire inputs but only 1 silver. The problem is we have no Quicksilver input either, so we have to use the Glyph of Rejection to extract it from a silver input. This all makes for a pretty finicky workflow, and I won't even get into using the purification glyph. I put a solve together at 38 cycles and decided that was good enough. I even optimized the cost tiebreaker quite a bit, but with less than 24 hours to go to the deadline, I realized this wouldn't cut it. So I started from scratch, this time aiming for 37 cycles, but as I was finishing it up, I realized 36 was within spitting distance. It took some finagling, shout out to this piston for making what I thought was an impossible maneuver, but I finally got 36 cycles. This I was pretty sure was minimum, but I wasn't 100%. In any case, I optimized the cost as well as I could with only a few hours remaining, but I was still feeling pretty good about my placement. I figured only about 20 people would get min, and I'd probably be in the top half of them. The results stream started with 50th place at 43 cycles. It quickly dropped to 40 cycles, but everything was still fine. Then this happened.
And we are dropping straight to minimum cycles.
Excuse me? 42 people found min cycles? That's crazy. Oh well, the cost tiebreaker is still at almost 1,000, and mine is at 685. There's a lot of room for some pile-ups. Nope, I was at 33rd. Have I mentioned that this community is cracked? Turns out there was an easier method to get to 36 that I wasn't using. So once again, I was working harder for a crappier result. Story of my life, people. And surprise, surprise, it's Rebix in first. A double win this week, nicely done. Rebix at this point is so far ahead, he's all but guaranteed to win the tournament. Possibly even if he dropped out after this week. Here's me, by the way. Just a small step behind Mr. Puzzle. I can still do it. We finally made it to the penultimate puzzle, which in most tournaments is the last regular puzzle, as the finale is usually computation, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. This one was called Intumescent Lead. And what's that? You don't know what intumescent means? It's honestly pretty embarrassing. I use that word all the time. Anyway, as has been tradition with this tourney, there was one normal metric and one bizarre metric. The normal one was area, and there's not much to say about this one. I got to 42 area with this funky mobile Burlow wheel. It got 18th place, who cares? Shadow Cluster took first with 40 area. Let's just get this video over with. The weird metric was grabs, meaning the number of grab symbols on the instruction tape. I calculated that min grabs was 2, since you could grab both inputs with one grab, do some wiggling to turn the fire pieces into water and move them onto bonders, while simultaneously dropping the Quicksilver in the proliferation glyph. Then you'd need a second grab to pick up the lead and another fire input, then do some more wiggling to get everything bonded correctly. Job done. So imagine my surprise when, in the results stream chat, people started talking about one grab solutions. I genuinely thought they were trolling. But, turns out, I was treating the metric as grabs per output, but that's not what it is, it's just grabs. Let's rewind to earlier in this very video.
In fact, it has been proven that every puzzle is beatable with either 3 or 4 instructions, and they all look something like this.
Literally every puzzle can be beaten with just one grab instruction. It's not a secret. I knew that. I'm just an idiot. But you know what? Fuck that. I was never going to make a 4-eye solve. I said rate instructions is not suitable for a tournament, but free space instructions is even worse. Sure, as we approached the top solves, they were less like 4-eye solves and more like conditional, thingamajigs. I got 44th, Albatross got first. I don't care, fuck this puzzle. I'm not crying, you're crying. Honestly though, I was getting a bit burnt out at this point. 10 weeks of hardcore puzzling is a lot, and it's stressful as hell. But we're in the home stretch now. It's unfortunate that I had 2 more bad weeks in a row, but I was still hanging on to 7th place somehow. Would I be able to stay there, or even surpass Mr. Puzzle? Probably not. But it all came down to one last puzzle, the grand finale. Everyone on the Discord was speculating whether it'd be a computation puzzle or not. Every tournament has always ended with a computation puzzle, aside from Zorflax's goated 2024 tourney. You see, this game attracts a certain type of computery engineer hyper-nerds. They see that this game is Turing complete, and therefore cannot resist turning these silly little arms and marbles into terrible computers. I myself am not a computery engineer hyper-nerd, more of an art snob know-it-all if anything. So these types of puzzle are not my favorite. Well, that's not totally true. I always end up enjoying myself with them, sometimes very much so. It's always fun to do something you weren't sure you were capable of, but that enjoyment usually came after a lot of stress and misery. I've made subtraction calculators, some other type of calculator, I think. Geez, what does this one do again? Man, I built these solves, but I have literally no idea what they're doing, let alone how they work. All this is to say, computation is not my wheelhouse, and I kind of think it should be split off into its own competition, as not every participant is a computery engineer hyper-nerd. Nevertheless, it's what the crowd was expecting as the puzzle reveal drew near, but somehow I had a feeling we were in for something different. We all waited with bated breath as the final puzzle was unleashed. Oh, it's overlap. I'm not doing this. Thanks for watching. Oh man, is it really overlap? Yuck. So overlap is a glitch in the game that allows you to lay 2 parts on top of each other. The game works perfectly well with these anomalies, triggering glyphs from bottom to top. In a lot of ways, it's an entirely new way to play the game, and it even has its own leaderboard. But I had never really messed around with overlap, in part because I didn't know how to do the glitch, but also because it's not really a relevant mechanic for some. There's no overlap sum records, for instance. So, in the end I decided I was going to skip this puzzle. That's fine, right? I'll probably still be able to cling to a top 10 spot, I think. And you don't mind a bit of an anticlimax to this video, do you? I'll just call it here. Well, let me take another look at the scoreboard. Damn, Gooey is right on my tail, not to mention Winter 1703, Ebenov, and Spiritual Shampoo. The more I looked at it, the more I realized my top 10 position was not solid at all. Okay, I guess let's learn how to do overlap. Oh, it's super easy. Okay, let's solve the puzzle. Oh, that was super easy too. Huh. But wait, I haven't talked about this puzzle at all yet. It was called One Last Favor, and there was only one metric to solve for: overlap cost. Some players had been bemoaning the lack of a proper cost puzzle this tournament, to which I say, be careful what you wish for. In retrospect, cost is probably the kindest introduction to the overlap mechanic. Just take a look at these overlap cycles solutions. They're essentially biblically accurate angels at this point. So since the metric here is cost, let's break down what we need to pay for. So this puzzle needs quintessence, purification, calcification, a bonder, a debonder, and of course an arm. Now if this wasn't an overlap puzzle, you would need 3 hexes of track, but with the power of the glitch, I was able to cut that down to 2. Add that all together and you get a cost of 100G. But solving for 100G was way too easy. And when a cost puzzle seems too easy with track, that probably means you can do it without track. I sketched out a few 90G layouts, but it wasn't clear whether they were workable or not. Did I really want to commit to the slog to find out? Maybe 100G is good enough. Probably not. You see, because there's only one metric this week, and because it's the finale, your score for that metric is doubled, meaning if there was ever a week to grind, it was this one. Alright, fuck it, let's do 90G. Maybe it's recency bias, but the dip from 100G to 90G is maybe one of the most laborious undertakings I've ever done in this game. I spent days working on layouts that just didn't work. A breakthrough came when I realized I could put the disposal glyph under one of the inputs, which frees up a lot of space to maneuver the unfinished product. This had the downside of looking and sounding like this every time I ran the machine. Every single time. With this layout, I got maybe 90% of the way there, then almost had a panic attack when a geometry issue seemed utterly unresolvable. I had to step away from the game and go to bed, and I could feel my blood boiling as I tried to sleep. The next morning I woke up, resolved the issue, and finished the solve. Ta-da! I gotta say, the surge of dopamine when you hit the victory screen on a solve like this, it's what makes it all worth it. I was able to optimize the tiebreaker of area a decent amount, but I had to cut my work time short as my family and I had to go out of town for my daughter's dance competition. Oh, that's right, I'm working full-time and raising 2 kids while obsessing over this silly game. It's, kind of unsustainable. This is probably my last tourney. So how many other people were able to hit 90G? 14. And how did I do? 13th. Yes, after all that effort, I was the second worst 90G solve. LMA right-o. Rebix only came in 6th, making this his weakest scoring performance, if you can believe that. And Calioresis, who was in 2nd place overall, took gold in this puzzle, scoring a whopping 20 points. But it wasn't enough to topple Rebix's enormous lead, and thus Rebix is the undisputed winner of the Opus Magnum 2026 tournament. Huge congratulations. Calioresis took 2nd, Shino took 3rd, a huge achievement for his first tourney. He'll be one to keep an eye on in future competitions. Biggie took 4th, and Mr. Puzzle took 5th. Look, the dream of beating Mr. Puzzle was never gonna happen, because the fact of the matter is, he's better than me. I've come to accept that. As for me, I did fall 1 place to 8th. Whoosh Push came up from behind with an impressive 2nd place in the finale, squeaking just ahead of me by 0.4 points, stealing 7th. Nicely done, you bastard. But hey, I made it to the top 10. By the skin of my teeth, it felt like. It feels like I seriously underperformed this tournament. Did I get worse, or did everyone else just get cracked? But in addition to congratulating Rebix for a well-deserved victory, I'd also like to spotlight all the newcomers who stuck it out to the end, and even those who just popped in for a puzzle or two. It's so great to see new players discovering this game and resonating with it as much as I and others in the community have. And of course, I have to give huge thanks to the host Kazian for pulling off such a successful competition. This tournament was an absolute blast to participate in, and it's nice to be forced out of my comfort zone into weird metrics like width, bestagon, and overlap. Now let us never speak of them again. Seriously though, I can tell that running these things is stressful as hell, even when there's not a viral YouTube video turning many eyeballs your way. And I'm going to be feeling that stress firsthand because I'm going to be hosting the 2027 tournament. And I promise it won't be all sum puzzles. I'll have more details in, like 7 months or so stay tuned. And with that, we're finally at the end of the video. Thank you so much for sticking it out to the end. I'm probably not going to do any more Opus Magnum content for a while, but I might make a few more gaming vids and maybe some other nerdy stuff too. Subscribe if you find my storytelling at all appealing. I love seeing number go up. Now, if you all don't mind, I look forward to not thinking about this game for a nice long chunk of time. See you in the next one. Galaxy out.